Terrific. It looks like the tech all worked again. I have nightmares now of the tech not working for PMA webinars. I've gone from having like nightmares about high school things to nightmares about PMA webinars not working. So yay, we have everything working and everyone is here. And I see that we're live on LinkedIn. So thank you everyone for coming today, to the panelists that will be introducing themselves, and also to those of you who are watching us on LinkedIn. If you're watching us on LinkedIn, please drop a quick note introducing yourselves as well and let us know where you are in this equation. So are you a brand? Are you an agency? Are you one of the influencers who's here to get a little bit of inside information? Whatever you are. Also, if you have any questions for the panelists, you can drop them into the LinkedIn and we'll see if we have time to work any of them in. So welcome to Leveraging Influencer Authority to Win the AI Search and LLM Era, which is a really long title, but the problem is right now we have this like LLMs and AI overviews and all these other different things that are like similar but different. So we're going to kind of refer to them interchangeably today. So we might be talking about LLMs, but that also might mean AI overviews. We might specifically talk about Gemini separately, where it is a little bit different from the AI overviews, but we're going to kind of intermingle all of those things. So I am Tricia Meyer. I'm the Executive Director of the Performance Marketing Association. We have an influencer council and an AI council. So they kind of came together to come up with the questions and the topics that we have for today. So thank you, all of the panelists. I will let you introduce yourselves, starting with Sofia.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sofia. I'm a director of client strategy at PartnerCentric, and I work on performance-driven influencer programs to turn influencer marketing into measurable revenue drivers.
Yeah. Ben.
Hey everyone, Ben Trevizo, founder and president of Alta Media Partners. We're an affiliate commerce agency unifying marketplace, D2C affiliate, TikTok shop, and creator commerce.
Fantastic. And Veronica.
Hi everyone, I'm Veronica Gauthier, SVP of Growth at Dreamday. At Dreamday, I oversee our affiliate and influencer practices and work closely across PR, creator, and performance teams to help brands show up in places consumers are discovering, researching, and making purchase decisions today.
Fantastic. And I have to really thank you all, because it was hard getting people to come on this panel. Like, everyone thinks it's a great idea and everyone wanted to talk about it, but no one was willing to get on camera and actually like put the data out there to say what they're actually doing and the results that they're seeing. So I know that we have a lot of people that are watching today because they're like, yeah, we're so interested in this and we're trying to do it, but we're not to a point yet where we feel like we're experts to talk about it. So also, this is fantastic timing. I don't know, for everybody who's watching, you've seen a couple of different things that have come out just in the last 2 days. I'll drop some links as we get a chance in here. First of all, Tenuity came out with a study where they were talking about AI overviews, and they had done some different data, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And then also right before we got on today, I saw that Ahrefs has just released a report. And just a quick quote from that to start this out. YouTube mentions were the single biggest factor correlated with brand visibility. ChatGPT, AI mode, and AI overviews all had strong correlations to the number of YouTube videos plus AI citations. So just kind of think about that as we're going into this, that we're seeing these reports now coming out like daily, weekly, that are starting to talk about all these different things that we're going to be talking about today. They're showing us the data. We're going to start talking about the actionable tips for all of you who are watching. So let's kind of start on the consumer side of it. So how are consumers moving away from the traditional search box and into LLMs, and why is this important for the brands? Let's start at Sofia.
Sure. I think the biggest thing to note here is that consumers are moving away from allowing brands to introduce them to whatever products brands want, and are coming to the LLMs with a very clear intent of a question that they're asking or a query that they're wanting to look for a specific response to. And so the focus is shifting away from persuasion to verification of that shopping intent that's already present in consumers. So the research is happening before the user even lands on the brand website. So if you're not present as answering those key questions that consumers have, you're invisible in the market until that point. With how personalized the queries as well are on LLMs, it's really important to have visibility over the breadth of queries that you are covering as a brand, the questions that you're answering both on your website and in your partnerships, in order to be visible in this new space as well.
Right. Ben, thoughts?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that, we're really shifting from searching, which is kind of what we've done for the better part of the last several decades, to asking. And if you look at the way that LLMs are designed, they're designed essentially to skip the whole research, phase of discovery altogether. And there's much less friction. I mean, I don't think the average consumer loves like having to spend a ton of time clicking around, opening up like 15 different browser tabs. And the way that consumers are able to get a much more personalized answer, through LLMs, for very specific things that they're asking for, versus like what you would normally type in a search prompt. So think of like 10 best mattresses or something like that would generally be something that you would type into a search engine, and then start like your research and discovery phase there. I think with LLMs you're able to get way more specific in a much faster time, and you can get that information much more quickly, in aggregate. So instead of top 10 best mattresses, people are typing in things like best mattresses for people with lower back pain or side sleepers and things like that. And you're able to get a much more detailed, personalized response through LLMs. And I think that's why, that whole kind of friction phase of having to click through and do your own research is one of the greatest appeals, for LLMs.
Like that.
Yeah, and I would say I agree with Sophia and Ben, and I would just add my take is that they're just no longer searching in a linear way, which is what I think many of us have been accustomed to. Query, click, compare, buy, that is sort of evolving as they're increasingly becoming more aware of AI and how it can serve them and the summarization options and how they can compare brands and explain trade-offs. And I think that that behavior is really shifting discovery. It's no longer who ranks on page one, but it's who's included in the answer. So I think it's just a shift in mindset. And for brands, I think that's incredibly important. And I think it matters because visibility is moving more upstream.
And as of last week, part of it is Google kind of forcing us. It's that, you think you're typing in the search box, but then you're actually being pulled into their, LLM per se anyway. So you might think you're doing a normal search, but then you're getting kind of the combination of search results and those overviews as well. So kind of getting pushed into it. So we've been talking, obviously, in the PMA about affiliate in general and about how it's so important for brands to be working with affiliates and media because that's influencing all these LLMs. But talking specifically today about influencer, why do the LLMs prioritize influencer content in their responses, and what are some of the platforms that are being prioritized?
Sure, I'll jump in on this one. I think mainly because it's you've got high authority. It's really authentic content. Influencers or creators really serve as the trust layer. And then I think that one thing that's really interesting with LLMs and how it really differs from search is that you've got this, I guess, long form format, and LLMs can pick up on sentimentality, and there's certain ways that you can ask ChatGPT or whatever LLM platform questions that are much harder to return as a result if it's just articles and content versus that sort of like sentiment that is measurable with LLMs, from creator content, specifically with YouTube. I would say that as far as like which platforms are being prioritized, Reddit I think is a really big one, and then as far as like we're talking just creator content influencers in general, YouTube. And I think the reason why YouTube is because the long form video format, there's so much information and detail that can be included around products and recommendations, that you can't in any of those kind of shorter form video formats.
Yeah, and I would say I agree with Ben. I think we've seen YouTube definitely rise to the top. And we're seeing that a lot of the experience-led content, like the I tried it, or here's what worked for me, or the would I buy this again, like that type of content that you often see on YouTube, and even within Substack and blogs, definitely rise to the top because it's useful, very credible, and oftentimes just well supported by the broader web. So I think anytime that we're seeing content that's like really rich with comparisons or opinions, that is really what is differentiating from content that's showing up, because the LLMs aren't just prioritizing influencer content simply just because. They're prioritizing it because it serves that specific purpose and it is directly aligned to how consumers are thinking about and searching for when they're plugging in those prompts and asking those questions to the LLMs.
Absolutely.
Totally in agreement. I definitely think that it comes down to the experience. You're having the perception of real people who have really tried these products and can really provide in-depth insights into very specific structural workflows and how things are worded that can help in answering those questions, as far as how does this compare to direct competitors? What's the durability? And back to the sentimentality of things, how did that product or brand make you feel when you were using it or interacting with it, which then can feed into the tone and approach that a user is implementing with the LLM when searching that query. And so it helps bridge the gap that, like Ben mentioned, can't really be conveyed in the same way with static content that is more previously was prioritized for that upper funnel engagement.
So you're all kind of talking about this authenticity and the honesty and the opinions. So how do you encourage those influencers to be authentic when they're promoting, but also staying within your brand guidelines, the disclosure rules, things like that?
I think it's so important to definitely have guardrails where you're having, we'd recommend like an avoid list of like, especially with certain verticals that are quite regulated or have a lot more directives in place that really have to be navigated carefully. Having an avoidance list and certain strict guardrails of do's and don'ts is really important, but allowing flexibility and creativity to take the lead with creators, moving away from a static and really strict script is really beneficial, because at the end of the day, you're working with a creator because you identify that they add value because of the content that they make and the way that they engage with their audience. So if you're providing an extremely rigid script to that person and asking them to say the brand name in the first 3 seconds and say these specific words in this order at this point and show it in this pose, that takes away from that authenticity, and audiences notice this. And so they're not going to give the same type of engagement to a post that their favorite creator has done that looks nothing like the rest of the content. That's the reason they follow that person.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say the way that we approach it, or I would say the term that we've coined when we're encouraging our influencers to remain authentic while also ensuring that we're, meeting the brand guidelines, is we give them a message architecture, is how we frame it. Essentially, what that means is they'll have very clear guardrails around the product truths so that they know how to speak about the product. Any claims that they can or cannot make, we make sure that that is very clearly defined, along with any disclosures or any customer pain points. We really want to make sure that we're also providing them with brand safe language and flexible prompts that allow them to really tell their own story and in their own voice. So I think we really think about it as the authenticity and compliance don't have to be in conflict, and that the best creator briefs that we see are really ones that protect the brand without flattening the creator's voice. So that message architecture becomes very, very critical in ensuring that we're able to preserve both sides.
Yeah, I agree with, both those sentiments. I think, having the bumpers on the rails, so to speak, obviously compliance, do's and don'ts, and just having a really strong brief. That's, I think that's kind of table stakes, for success here. You don't want to tell the creators exactly what to do. There's a reason why they have an audience and a following, and you got to have, some trust and be willing to let go a little bit. But then also nurture ideas, constantly updating a briefs. Like the way that we look at it, a creator brief is a living document. Sometimes it's updated weekly, based on like, news, PR, things that happen in the media, stuff that's happening in the world, things that are relevant to the product, the brand. Those things can get thrown out there as ideas and like, catalysts. And then we just let the creators run with that, as long as they're not violating any of the guidelines and, those bumpers on the rails, then, we look at it as like, that's how we retain the authenticity.
And ironically, talking about YouTube in particular, we actually have a post on the PMA website from just yesterday afternoon. There's a new study that was out where some college students actually did a whole study of like 10 years of YouTube videos. And they looked at like 1 million videos or something, and they were looking for affiliate links and disclosures. And they showed that it was like less than half, I think, of affiliate links had disclosures on YouTube, and far less than that actually had FTC disclosures that would actually, that were clear and conspicuous and all those kinds of things. So yeah, it is obviously, it's a big thing on YouTube because we know that not a lot of the influencers are disclosing properly, and that can come back and hurt the brand. So a lot of times when we think about influencers and content creators in general, we talk about like new releases. Oh, we have this new product come out, or we have these different things. But how can you use influencers to shift customer sentiment, or maybe replacing outdated or negative perceptions of a brand or things like that? How can you use the influencers in this case to kind of impact that part of the LLMs?
Yeah, I think influencers are especially valuable when it comes to helping to change the narrative, because they have the ability to create content that can directly address any consumer hesitation. And so the key from my perspective is that we need to really understand and identify what AI currently believes about the brand, what's outdated, are there reviews or Reddit threads, maybe old articles, competitor comparisons that are really shaping the answer. And so I think we typically will do an audit to really get a good understanding of that, and then build influencer strategies that can help create fresh proof points against those gaps. So, for example, if there's a perception that something is too expensive, we may work with creators to help build a narrative that can really explain value, durability, maybe the quality of the product, or even the cost per use, things that really help to offset that negative sentiment. There's lots of different examples of this. It could be if perception is that something is not credible, how can we leverage expert opinion or work with expert creators that can help to add that authority? So just depending on the product and what particular industry we're working in and what that sentiment is, we can craft some narratives and messages and work closely with influencers to help reshape that.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is influencers really serve as the trust layer in influencing purchase decisions, more so now than ever. And if you look at it, associations is kind of important there. So by a brand associating with a specific influencer creator, that in and of itself, without having to go out and purchase and buying reach, and it's really tough to do that through just ads alone. That really changes the perception. One of our brands did a big partnership and investment with Travis Kelce, and right away there's an association that's created right there, that can really reshape those perceptions. And I think that because people are getting most of their information, at the very least, a lot of their information these days, from social media, that's way more influential than any kind of like remarketing or rebranding that the brand themselves can do. I think they trust those creators more, and thereby that association is really what changes those perceptions, or has the potential to.
I think just to add one more thing, because I think most things have already been said on this, but there's another layer of authority as well that comes with engagement. So influencers have the advantage that they are not just content pieces that are going to the vast cloud of nothing, and they actually are engaging with real people and having feedback from real people as well that are either current or prospective customers of the brand. And so by having an influencer try and reshape the narrative in collaboration with the brand, we have the added layer of trust of a peer review almost of the followers that are engaging with that content as well.
I love that. So we had a question come in from Dennis, who's actually on our AI Council of the PMA. With FTC enforcement getting stricter, what's the minimum disclosure standard brands should require from their creators? Are any of you specialist in that area?
I would say at a high level, creators just must clearly disclose any of the material connection to the brand in a way that's easy to notice, easy for a consumer to understand. I think that's something else that's really important, and that it's visible before or even at the moment where that particular creator is making some sort of an endorsement or claim on behalf of the brand. um, that it would be like in its most simplest form. Obviously, I think there's many different layers to that, just depending on the brand and the product and the vertical or category that that brand is within.
Yeah, I think making sure disclosing that they might earn affiliate commission for any products purchased through their links, whether the video is sponsored or not, whether they receive free product from that brand or not. It's always better to play it safe. And I think that, if you cover all those bases and, us as agencies, I mean, that's something that, we look at and audit and make sure that, all of those creators are following those guidelines, and that's stuff that you include in the brief. But I think those are kind of the three main areas there, whether it's like an actual ad, putting the hashtags and making it very visible. I think those are kind of like the three core areas.
For timelines, it just differs so much industry to industry, and some are so much more heavier regulated than others. As a best practice standpoint, I agree with what Veronica and Ben have said, that you just need to make sure that the consumer never feels like slighted or like they are being lied to, because the power of influencer marketing and its influence on LLM visibility as well is the trust that their audiences have in them. And so if you don't disclose things clearly with enough time ahead of things launching or going live, or people being influenced, as is the ultimate goal, you're eroding on that trust. And that is a hard no with any campaign, in order, because it can just completely upturn any successful traction that you're getting if that consumer sentiment shifts back to, oh, I'm being lied to.
Yeah, and there's also legal ramifications with that too, that, your creators can get those brands in a lot of potential legal trouble if they're not, following disclosures properly, or they're making false claims. And even though it may feel like, this creator went rogue and did something they weren't supposed to, I mean, ultimately the responsibility still comes back to the brand a lot of times. And so that's where, just having, the compliance piece really nailed down, and having someone watching that all the time is really important.
Mm-hmm. I'll try to drop in some resources on the disclosure stuff as well, because it's kind of ever changing and we haven't gotten a lot of updates lately. What we have been hearing is it is a little more up to interpretation, but I will say that I have seen that the LLMs do prioritize creators who are disclosing. And if you ask them, why is somebody an authority about this? Why do you trust this site? A lot of times the LLMs will come back and say they clearly disclose that they're getting compensation. They clearly disclose their affiliate links. And so the LLMs, they actually kind of encourage that themselves. So one of the big questions from the influencer side is, how are you rewarding the influencers that they're doing? So obviously this is all fantastic for the brands, that all of this can happen and the influencers can make this big difference. But this is performance marketing. And so we're not necessarily getting paid in the traditional performance marketing sense with the clicks or the vanity codes or things like that. So how are you rewarding those influencers for all of this work that they're doing to help out the brands?
I think the biggest thing is like negotiating usage rights, and obviously that comes with some form of compensation. The way that we look at it, so like we have a brand on TikTok Shop, and we've identified, several great pieces of content converting well, selling well. We want to make that available to our brands to repurpose across, all their different social channels. And if that starts getting surfaced by the LLMs, it would be really difficult, if not impossible, to kind of associate every view from every, citation, like, obviously with the clickless, model that's emerging. So we just look at it and we're like, okay, hey, if this is doing really well for you, we would love to put you on retainer, for top creators, hybrid, formats with a commission plus flat fee. So we look at all that, and for those really top of the top ones that we want to do, create a longer term association with, they're more than happy to give us usage rights, or our brands usage rights, in exchange for those retainers.
I'll add to that because we are moving so quickly away from a last click model and kind of that very linear view of the influence that a piece of content or creator is having on a purchase journey. At PartnerCentric, we're very big fans of the full funnel view. And so we have developed tools to analyze influencer content impact on overall web traffic in a holistic way that is not linear click to conversion and kind of has a wider view of that performance. So utilizing tools like that to analyze the holistic impact that an influencer's content is having on the brand and on conversions overall is helpful to help reward those creators. But beyond that, I would also say that there's another level of like relationship reward that can be provided where you can further build with an influencer that has proven to be a top advisory voice in the space for your target consumer base in bringing them in closer to the campaign planning stage and almost having an advisory relationship with them. This has proven really successful with influencers more and more now who want to get involved and want to participate in reaching their audience and in improving a product or a campaign for their audience as well and being involved at that level.
Yeah, I agree absolutely with Ben and Sophia said. I think we're seeing an evolution of the compensation model as we are really looking to reward creators for their contribution. And so I think some of the metrics that we've taken into account and that we consider when thinking about this is, inclusion in AI answers for priority prompts. How is the sentiment shifting in those AI generated responses? What are the number of third-party citations or mentions that are a result of the content that's being created? So there's a lot of, I would say this is still an emerging measurement area as it is getting more and more complex given the clickless nature of it. But there's definitely, I think, some emerging metrics and ways in which we are considering how to showcase value and how to reward based on overall contribution.
Yeah, thankfully, we're starting to see the networks help out a little bit, buying some new tools, coming up with some new technology that I think everyone's kind of dabbling in right now to figure out like what makes sense and what's aligning and what's not. So hopefully, as they continue to integrate those things into the networks, that will help all of you that are managing the programs as well. So for both kind of the agencies, the brands, and the influencers out there, how are you encouraging the influencers to format their content? So are you, telling them to use specific structures or certain data points or anything like that to make it more citable by the LLMs? Do you have any tips that you're using with them right now?
I would say generally the most citable influencer content is very specific, very structured, experience-based, and easy to understand. And it should answer the question that the customer would have asked the AI tool. So we're seeing a lot of strength in formats that are like best of list, product comparisons, pros and cons, FAQ formats, before and after, again, experience oriented content, step by step tutorials. And then even, I think Ben mentioned like that long form YouTube description or like a blog type post has also been a strength for content.
I 100% agree. I think it comes down to having them have the liberty of being creative and adapting the way that they're framing it, but making sure that they're being specific about how they want to do it. So even down to a specific use case of a product that maybe is widely applicable for different things, how did they use it and how did that affect them specifically, as well as having, I think it's useful to have some repeatable phrasing. At the end of the day, having consistent messaging that is repeated across a number of voices is what builds it as truth that is ingested to answer those queries. So relaying to the influencers that there are certain truths about the brand or the product that need to be kept in mind, no matter the format or no matter the use case, is really helpful in remaining consistent across the board.
Yeah, I think guiding creators to make semantically impactful content is important, and I think also thinking about from the user standpoint, what are they asking? I mean, it may not necessarily be best laptops 2026 or something like that. It could be I'm a security professional and need the best, most secure setup going into this year that allows for, XYZ compliance or whatever. And so if you think about, what the person asking the LLM, on the other end of it, and then kind of matching your response to that in your video. I see that a lot with like comparison videos, MacBook Pro versus, Dell, whatever, and just different kinds of products that are being likely going to be compared by a consumer who's searching and asking about those things. So I think having that kind of detail comparison, leaning into the advantages of having that long form video content, where you can make it very semantically differentiated from just like a text response, is really important.
We have a question that came in, kind of tagging on the last topic that we were talking on one of our board members, Katie Jones. What tools are you using to measure authority and quality of influence on the LLM? So what are you already sort of starting to tap into?
I mean, there's quite a few out there, Profound, Evertune, to name a few. But, there's also just, good old kind of manual servicing things and checking things. But those are a few of the main tools that we leverage.
Yeah, there's like Searchable, Scrunch, Profound, are a few that are being used currently across our client portfolio.
We found a lot of success with using Peak for pretty in-depth analysis as well, and it's what we leverage primarily for our AI visibility improvement services as well.
Perfect. Thank you for that. So let's talk again about the content. The creating all of this content, you're giving them a little bit of guidelines, but not too much. So how are you encouraging them to repurpose this content and why?
AI, I think, is just, it's not made to pull a result from one piece of content that's isolated. The key is in that repeatable truth about a brand. So that's true across creators, but it's also true across platforms. So it's really important to have that content repackaged and reproduced in a way that benefits both the algorithm and the discovery model that the different platforms utilize, and then creates iterations of that content that includes those key points that the brand really wants to get across and really wants customers that are looking for them to have as answers to their questions be available for the LLMs to cite.
Yeah, I think that this is actually really, really critical, repurposing content, because it's really, the LLMs are really not built for one post on one platform. They're looking for consensus. And I think that that's really, really, really important. And that's built from repeated, consistent signals. So if there's a influencer or creator that has made a TikTok, that can very easily also become an Instagram reel or a YouTube short or a blog post. And so I think that repeatability really, really matters, because each format is so different and they have different shelf lives and there's different paths to discoverability. So I think being able to create those different formats with that same content is really, really important and something that we encourage very often with our partners.
Yeah, we've seen success, for example, when we're cold starting a brand on TikTok Shop, they've got very little content. We haven't kicked up the creator affiliate engine and product sampling just yet. One of the easiest ways to get things going is if they've already got influencer content that's out there on Meta or anywhere else, work with those creators. Like we mine, content from those creators and get them to import that into TikTok and have the brands repost it and share it. And that's one good way to kind of like start the process for ramping up on TikTok Shop, for example. But to everyone else's point, I mean, it is a lot quicker than having to go out and sample and get people to make videos, and which can take weeks. So it's a good little kickstart, but then it also surfaces more visibility and consensus among the LLMs as well.
Yeah, I think the way that I look at it is like one creator partnership should really create like a content ecosystem. Is just another way of saying it.
Exactly.
We did have another question that I missed that came in from Dennis. Is putting the disclosure in the video description enough, or does it need to be said inside of the video itself? So as the person who spends lots and lots of time looking at the FTC guidelines, I will say, yes, it must be in the video. If you're saying stuff about the video, then you have to have the disclosure in the video. If you're talking about stuff in the links, you have to have some in the links. So the FTC's rule has always been like whatever format you have the endorsement in any way is the format that you also have to have the disclosure in. So best case scenario, you just have it every place. If you're having it in the video, if you need to have it on top of the video, like on TikTok, you need to have the words, but then you also need to say those words out loud as well. So again, better safe than sorry to include it in all of the different places and keep the brands out of hot water, because they're the ones that are going to get in the most trouble at this point. Although we are seeing some influencers getting in trouble as well, but usually people go for the deep pockets, which tends to be the brands themselves. So let's come up with a really good, like, kind of takeaway. I'm gonna, in addition to dropping some of the links and saying where we can find all of you, I want to give a really good takeaway for those out there that are managing a program. They're like, okay, I get it, I have to do this, but I only have a limited budget. Where do I even begin with this? So if you have this limited budget and you want to do some kind of test run, this month, where you want to say, like, I have this brand, where can I put this money and make the biggest impact on these LLM or AI overview citations? Where would you suggest that people take that money and put it?
YouTube.
YouTube?
100%. That's the number one, is what I would say. And what I wouldn't do is sink all of that budget into like one flashy integration with like a mega creator or very large creator. Would not recommend doing that. But as many smaller, highly relevant and engaged creators that have good content, that again go back to the things that we talked about with what do we think that the LLMs are going to be citing? What kind of content, the structure, the sentimentality? Do these creators, fit that mold? Do they have that format? And I would look to, spread that across as many as you could. But I would definitely start with YouTube. Obviously, there's some nuance to this and the type of brand that we're talking about here. But overall, if we're talking about, where the LLMs are going to probably put most of their interest in synthesizing that content, I would say it's probably going to be YouTube.
Yeah, I feel like limited budget and testing is it's a hot topic right now that many of our brands are coming to us with. And so typically our recommendation is not to start with a broad influencer campaign, but to run a really focused AI visibility test around either one product, one customer pain point, or just one set of prompts that are highly valuable to you and your brand. And then from there, we would run a series of recommended tests where you pick maybe 5 to 10 high intent AI prompts that you would want to influence. Maybe that's best dog food for picky eaters, or best clean skincare for acne prone skin, like very specific prompts. And then what we would recommend is auditing ChatGPT, Perplexity, Google Overviews, even Reddit, to see what that currently surfaces, identify those gaps, and then really prioritize, to Ben's point, a small group of high authority creators that you can really test with and give them that structured prompt to measure before and after so that you can determine best path forward.
I totally agree. I think that with limited budgets that seem to be at the center of every conversation around AI right now, because I mean, a lot of the feedback that we're hearing from every front when we have these discussions, and it covering influencer visibility on AI, but also just overall brand visibility, is how do we tie it back to ROI? How do we tie it back to the revenue? How do we measure this not beyond, because it's easy to say we have tools to measure the visibility share. However, the question is, well, my boss wants to know how much revenue this is going to make and how we tie it back to that. So having a more narrow focus on a certain set of products that maybe aren't getting as much attention on all of your other channels, and the impact won't be diluted by a cross-channel initiative, is going to be the best way to measure true impact on your bottom line from the efforts that are being carried out on the visibility front.
So while you've been talking, I've been dropping in a couple of links to everybody on LinkedIn. One is that new Tenuity survey or report that just came out in the last week. The second one, it looks like a really long, like crazy weird link, and I don't know why that's what it is, but it's the Ahrefs report, and it's just like a link to their Dropbox or something, and that was the best that I could find. It everybody else is just embedding it on LinkedIn, so you can take a look there at that report as well. And then also a little bit of an ask from me, because we do have a lot of brands and agencies that are watching today. PMA is doing a brand and agency study right now that we're trying to get more results within the next week. So if you manage any brands, we're asking just some basic questions about brand management. Do you work with subnetworks? Do you work with toolbars, things like that? But we also have some questions at the end about LLMs and whether you are starting to do the kind of work that these panelists were just talking about in terms of looking for what's impacting the brand, and are you finding ways to reward the creators that are helping influence those? So we're looking to get like another maybe 200 responses in the next week, so we could really use your help. So I dropped that in there as well. So I want to thank all of the panelists so much for coming today. And I'm just gonna ask one last question of what is the best way for people to be able to find and contact you? Sofia.
So best way would be on LinkedIn, Sofia Toebak, and you can always get in touch with us at partnercentric.com as well.
Ben.
LinkedIn or our website, altamediapartners.com.
And Veronica.
Similar, LinkedIn or our website, which is dreamday.la.
Terrific. Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for watching today and for all of the support for the PMA and all of the great content that we're able to put out. Have a fantastic day, everyone.
Thank you.